A room stands filled with gold, plates, vessels, and ornaments carried here from temples across an empire, stacked as high as a man can reach. The ruler who promised this metal delivered it. The soldiers have weighed it, melted it, and divided it into shares. Now they lead that same ruler out to a stake in the square. Welcome to Same Day, Different Century. I'm Zach. Today is July 26th. The empire was the largest anyone had ever built in the Americas. Its people called it Tawantinsuyu, the land of four parts. It ran along the spine of the Andes for more than 2,000 miles, from present-day Colombia into Chile. Roads bound it. Storehouses fed its armies. Runners carried knotted cords called quipu, which recorded administrative information such as tribute and census data. At its center sat a god king, the Sapa Inca, whose dead predecessors were kept as mummies, dressed, fed, and consulted as if they still lived. In 1532, that empire was less than a century old and freshly wounded. A few years earlier, its ruler, Huayna Capac, died around 1527 during an epidemic, and the death of his likely designated successor, Ninan Cayuchi, helped trigger a succession crisis. The traditional account holds that smallpox crossed the ocean with Europeans and outran them, moving south through indigenous trade networks and reaching the Andes years before the first Spaniard did. Some historians question that route. What the sources agree on is that something killed the emperor and a great many other people. Two of Huayna Capac's sons claimed the red fringe of wool that marked the ruler. Atahualpa held the north and the loyalty of the veteran army. His half-brother Huáscar held the old capital, Cusco. Their war ran for years and ended only months before the Spanish arrived. Atahualpa's generals broke Huáscar's forces and took him prisoner. Atahualpa himself was resting at hot springs near the mountain town of Cajamarca, close to his victorious army, when word came of strangers on the coast. The strangers were fewer than 200. Francisco Pizarro, a soldier from the Spanish provinces, then in his 50s, had sailed south from Panama on his third attempt to reach a rumored land of gold. He landed with about 180 men, some 60 of them mounted, a few small cannon, and a Dominican friar. They marched inland and climbed into the mountains, into the heart of an empire of millions. On November 16, 1532, Atahualpa agreed to meet the Spanish in the great square of Cajamarca. He came in the evening, carried on a litter, surrounded by thousands of attendants, most of them unarmed servants and courtiers, not soldiers. Pizarro had hidden his men inside the buildings around the empty plaza. The friar, Vicente de Valverde, walked out with an interpreter and a religious book and spoke to the ruler of a distant god and a distant king. Spanish chroniclers later claimed that Atahualpa examined Valverde's religious text and dropped it. Pizarro gave the signal. The cannon fired into the packed crowd. The cavalry burst from cover, animals no one in the Andes had ever seen, ridden by men wearing steel. In the enclosed square, the attendants had no room to flee and almost no means to fight. Spanish accounts, written to justify what they had done, still record thousands of Inca casualties and little to no Spaniard deaths. Pizarro reached Atahualpa, pulled him from the litter, and took him alive. That capture worked because of what the Sapa Inca was. Command in the empire flowed through his person. With him held, his own generals hesitated to attack and risk his life. Pizarro had seized the single point through which the whole system ran. Atahualpa read the Spanish appetite quickly. He offered a ransom no one had ever proposed, to fill the room he was being held in with gold, to a line he marked on the wall as high as he could reach, and to fill a second smaller room with silver, twice over. The gold room, by one Spanish account, ran about 22 by 17 feet. Pizarro agreed. Over the following months, Atahualpa's subjects stripped temples and palaces across the empire, including the Great Sun Temple at Cusco, its walls sheathed in gold, and carried the metal to Cajamarca. The Spanish melted objects of extraordinary craft into plain bars. When the shares were counted, a single horseman received about 90 pounds of gold, and twice that weight again in silver. A footman got half as much. Men who had been nobodies in Extremadura were suddenly rich. It stands among the largest ransoms ever recorded. Even in captivity, Atahualpa still ruled. He ordered Huáscar killed, likely fearing that the Spanish could use his rival as a political alternative. The Spanish now held the northern king and had lost the southern one, leaving Atahualpa without a rival they could raise in his place. Then the ground shifted. Diego de Almagro, Pizarro's partner, arrived with fresh Spanish reinforcements. These newcomers had missed the ransom and wanted a share of whatever remained. To them, a living Atahualpa was an obstacle. At the same time, rumors reached the camp that one of Atahualpa's generals was massing an army to free him. Pizarro sent Hernando de Soto with a party of horsemen to ride out and find it. In de Soto's absence, Pizarro and Almagro moved to end the matter. They held something they called a trial. What it actually consisted of is unclear. The detailed account of judges and formal charges comes from a chronicler writing 70 years later, and historians have questioned whether it happened that way at all. The charges, as reported, included the killing of Huascar, idolatry, polygamy, and plotting rebellion against a crown Atahualpa had never heard of a year earlier. Why the Spanish chose execution rather than keeping the compliant puppet clearly in their interest remains debated. Some scholars stress genuine fear of the rumored relief army, a small band deep in hostile mountains, unwilling to hold such a dangerous hostage. Others stress the pressure of Almagro's men and the fact that the ransom was already collected and banked, the prisoner now worth more dead than alive. Both pressures were likely at work. The sentence was death by burning. For Atahualpa, this meant more than death. In Inca belief, a ruler's body had to be preserved to endure among the ancestors. Valverde offered a bargain: accept baptism and be strangled rather than burned. Atahualpa accepted and was baptized with the name Francisco. In the square of Cajamarca, he was killed with a garrote. Most modern historians place his execution on July 26, 1533. De Soto returned days afterward. He had found no army. He's reported to have said openly that the killing was a mistake, and that Atahualpa should have been sent to Spain for the king's judgment. By then, it was finished. Killing the emperor removed the empire's center, and left the Spanish holding a machine of government with no one at its controls. Pizarro's answer was to keep the throne occupied by men who depended on him. He installed Tupac Hualpa, a young Inca prince, as a Spanish-controlled ruler. The young man was dead within months. He then found another prince, Manco Inca, a survivor of Huascar's line, and in November 1533 marched into Cusco with him at his side, taking the capital with the help of Andean peoples who had every reason to welcome the fall of the old regime. In December, in the captured city, Manco was crowned. The image of a handful of Spaniards toppling a great empire by nerve and steel alone is not the whole picture. The empire was already split by civil war when Pizarro arrived. Disease had killed its emperor and his heir before the first Spaniards reached the highlands. And tens of thousands of Andean fighters, peoples resentful of Cusco, and the defeated followers of Huascar joined the Spanish against Atahualpa. The conquest was, in large part, an Andean war that outsiders entered late and eventually captured for themselves. Nor did resistance end at Cajamarca. Manco Inca, meant to serve as a puppet, turned on the Spanish in 1536 and laid siege to Cusco. When that failed, he withdrew into the mountains at Vilcabamba, where a rump Inca state held out for another generation. Only in 1572 did the Spanish capture and execute its last ruler, Tupac Amaru, in the great square of Cusco, on ground where the Inca state had once staged its highest ceremonies. The empire took generations to build. Its capital fell within a year, and the Spanish spent 4 more decades discovering that taking Cusco and holding the Andes were not the same thing. That same day, different century. I'm Zach. We'll be back tomorrow with another date, another story. Thanks for listening. Hey guys, it's Zach. If you're enjoying the show, please go to the episode description and there's a link where you can text me directly. It's a one-man show. I promise I'll be the one responding and talking with you. I'd love to hear from you and get to know you. Tell me what you're enjoying about the show. Hit me up with some recommendations for future episodes or anything else you want to talk about. I'll see you tomorrow.